Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is David Severance. Delighted to have you with me. Good morning, Martha. Nice to see you. There's Michael. Michael, nice to see you back in the space. Wayne, Sarah, all my good buddies are here. So nice to see all of you. Welcome to everyone else who's new to Chirag Shah Coaching and new to me on these calls. Delighted to be with you here this morning, 11:30 here on the East Coast. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. My name is David Severance. I'm the leadership coach here at Chirag Shah Coaching. These calls are what I call part of a series, which is leading yourself, leading your business. We'll be talking about how you lead yourself effectively. And that, of course, extends to all areas of how you show up in your business and how you contribute to it, how you help it grow, how you make it successful. We'll also be working in some topics that relate to teams. So if some of you have larger teams, there are some topics that we will be discussing at a later time. But for now, we're going to focus on 10 principles that are key to your success over time. Now, these 10 success principles have been developed by me and with some input from some others over a number of years. And I shared them with a whole bunch of folks on the calls last fall. So if you were on some of my calls last fall, you may remember some of these. If you're new to CSC or you weren't on the calls that I did then, we'll be going through these 10 principles over the next 20 sessions. These principles, if you follow them effectively and faithfully, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to grow your business to the greatest extent that it's capable of growing to. These are general principles that can be applied in many different ways throughout the business. I shared them with everyone last fall, and everyone said, these are really good. We need more time to think about this. We need more time to kind of think about how to apply this stuff. Can you please spend more time on it? So what we're going to do in these next sessions is we're going to have one session where I'll introduce the concept. We'll think about what it means, what it is, and then we'll follow up the following week with more of a how do we apply it kind of a conversation. And so we'll alternate for each of the principles. So we'll do this over 20 sessions of time. So the first one, in summary, we'll talk a little bit about what the concept is and a couple of things that you can keep in mind. And then the following week, we'll really think about what do you need to do to really live that principle effectively. And that's where we're definitely going to want everyone's input, things you've tried that worked, things you've tried that haven't worked. There's tremendous knowledge and talent in this space, and I want to make sure that we're using that to everyone's benefit as we go through. So as I often do, I will pull up a bunch of slides now, we'll talk through them a little bit, and then we'll pull them down when we're done and go to a little more discussion about them. So let me share this first success principle with you. I'll start by introducing myself a little bit to those of you who don't know me, who weren't on the calls that we just did the mini-series in April. Okay, agent success principle 1. We're talking about influence. Influence is the name of the game in any business, especially when it's selling, but certainly when you're leading yourself and or those around you. A couple of things about me, and we'll hop right into that. I've been a coach since 2005. I'm certified by the International Coach Federation, which doesn't matter, but it's the kind of most premier coaching certification organization out there. And I've been working with organizations since that time all over the world, all over every kind of industry. I've been working with leaders and teams of leaders at organizations, Fortune 500s, small startups, in manufacturing and software and banking and so many different fields. And I started working with MLSs in 2016. Chirag and I did some things there together here in the Westchester area, just north of New York City. And I've been coaching at CSC. When Chirag opened CSC, he said, David, please come to CSC with me and help these folks. I know that you've got a lot of stuff that will be helpful to them. So I'm delighted to see some old friends coming back for more discussion and exploration on these things that we know really matter to your success. Who are these calls for? If you're on this call and you might be saying to yourself, well, I'm just an independent agent. I don't lead a team or anything. Why should I be on a leadership call on Wednesdays? What I want to remind everyone is that no matter what your structure of your business looks like, you are and always will be starting by leading yourself. How you show up as a leader in your business and your life is the primary determiner of the success that you have overall, and everything flows from there. Who else might these calls be for? Well, if you want to lead yourself effectively, whether you're an independent leader or you lead others on a team, Absolutely. This is a place where you can find some value, some food for thought, some relevance. If you want to impact those more positively around you, that's what leadership is all about. If you understand that you're the single biggest influence on your success, this is a place to be to think about how you can do that better. If you're willing to think carefully and reflect on how you need to show up, how you need to think, how you need to be, and what you need to do to make your business work, this is a place for you. And if you're willing to focus on this over time, this is a place to be. Leadership is not something that's developed overnight. It's not something that has a simple list of 5 do's and 5 don'ts. And if you do those things and don't do those other things, you'll be the perfect leader. Doesn't work that way. I've coached millions of people from Fortune 500s down to one-person startups. And leadership just doesn't work that way. It's the most effective, successful leaders of businesses are people who spend time and reflection regularly over years and years and years, taking in all of their experience and knowledge and relationships and all that stuff, and somehow doing something with it mentally and then turning that into the right actions for their business. So let's begin. First principle we're going to be talking about is influence. Now, I wanted to make sure that we define influence in a certain way. The word influencing came into the business lexicon about 20 years ago as a verb. We want to be a good influencer. We want to influence those around us. When we talk about influence in terms of leading yourself, leading the business, we're talking about something like this: the ability to move someone else's mind in some way and or affect their behavior. Almost always, if you affect someone's mind, you'll affect their behavior because behavior flows from the mind, right? Whatever it is that we're thinking is the source of whatever it is we choose to do. And so whether you're working in sales or leadership or many other businesses, we all have the opportunity to affect or impact those around us. And so when we're talking about influencing people, what we're talking about is creating or impacting a shift in how a person thinks or what they choose to do. And so in the selling case, of course, it's in the most basic sense, it's how do you get someone who has not yet chosen to buy to the point of buying, right? They have to make a choice at that moment. And so to move their mind from I'm not ready to buy right now to now I'm ready to buy, right? That's the essence of the sales. It's the goal of the sales process. So obviously there's a role for influence everywhere. How important is influence to your success? Well, there's a bunch of things here. Your ability to influence matters in many, many, many situations, probably everywhere in your business, but here's a few. Pitching a client, of course, is the most important, probably the most obvious situation where your ability to influence makes all the difference. What about when your seller expects an unreasonably high sale price for the market? How do you influence that person to allow you to price the house appropriately so it'll sell? And what about when your buyer thinks that he or she can get something at an unreasonably low understanding of what the market is? You have an opportunity to influence there. Obviously, when you negotiate with other agents, you need to find a deal that comes out on favorable terms that work for you. Persuading a vendor to give you a special deal, right? You select all kinds of vendors to do things with you and for you. You have an opportunity to influence them at any time. We've talked in the past about having your vendors send you referrals, and we've told many of our agents, if you have vendors that you're sending business to that aren't sending referrals back to you, you should find somebody else. So how can you influence them to be sending referrals to you? Well, that's an influencing opportunity. We'll talk about that. Negotiating your split with Compass, right? It's not always easy, but it's the same as any other negotiation. You have the opportunity to influence that person. And of course, managing your team or convincing a great person to join you in your success. In all of these cases, the key pivot point is influence, your ability to influence or your lack of it at a moment in time. So if we think about influence, we can ask ourselves, where does influence come from? It happens sometimes and it doesn't happen other times. But in a very general sense, what is it that promotes influencing to be effective? That is, what is it that allows the other person to make that shift in their mind, in their interaction with you? Well, there's many things. Here are 4 of them. First, when the other knows of your expertise or knowledge, when you have some kind of street cred and you say you ought to price the house this way, or this is how we intend to market the house, if they have some awareness that you have some expertise or knowledge or something like that, then they can take what it is you have to say in a positive light and that may be enough to influence them. So certainly, of course, we always want to demonstrate our expertise or knowledge. But these other ones are equally important and maybe more important. How about the other believing you understand their interests and needs? This is at the core of it. If a person understands that you understand them, their interests, their needs, their goals, and this third one, that they trust that you are truly committed to helping them achieve their interests, needs, or goals, then you're in a position to influence them. If they don't believe those two things, if they don't believe you really understand their interests and or they believe you understand them but don't really care, chances are you're not going to move their mind. And so if that's the case, then we need to make sure that they do have an awareness that we understand their needs and that we're committed to their needs. Many agents that I see, of course, will say, oh, yes, of course, I'll do anything for you. I do everything for my clients. I go to the ends of the earth for them. Okay, that commitment is easy to state. It's a little hard to demonstrate ahead of time, of course. But really, do they really believe that you understand what matters most to them? If you've ever heard of the Med-C process that we talk about here at Chirag Shah Coaching, Med-C is about understanding their motivations, their expectations of an agent or a service provider, disappointments in the past that they would like to avoid this time around, and concerns that they may have about the business, about the transaction. If you go through the Med-C process, that's a way for you to understand what their interests and needs are, especially the motivations part, the first part. Finally, this is what it kind of all boils down to is, does the client recognize or experience that you have delivered value to them in their terms? And this is where we get to the concept of perceived versus actualized value. It's very easy for us to think we're providing all kinds of value to people because we've been doing it for years. We've got a lot of satisfied customers in our as our track record. It's easy to kind of rest on our laurels. But what really doesn't matter is what we think of what it is we're providing. The only thing that matters is what the other person thinks about what we're providing. And so if we're not looking at it from that point of view, and if they're not experiencing value delivered to them on their terms, there's no way they'll be influenced by us. And so if we seek to influence those around us as a leader, as a salesperson, as anyone in life, we need to understand that we need to have some of these things in place, as well as others. What can derail this? Well, all kinds of things. And you can think of a time where maybe you failed to influence somebody. I'm going to ask you that after these slides. I'm going to ask you to bring to mind a time where you were not effective in influencing as you had wished. And see if perhaps one of these things that we just talked about was really not there. They heard what you had to say. They may have thought that you had expertise and knowledge, but they didn't feel that you delivered real value to them in the pitch, let's say. Or maybe they think that you understand their needs, but something about the way that you communicated it made them feel that they weren't really important to you, or you weren't really committed to it in some way. Or maybe you delivered some kind of thing that you thought was valuable, but they didn't, which means you misunderstood something about their audience, right? This happens all the time to us, and happens everywhere in our life, whether we're trying to get our kids to clean up their room, get your teenage kid to pick up all the clothes off the floor, or influence your spouse or significant other to do something, or go with you to a restaurant that he or she might not otherwise want to go to. All these things are the same. What derails this? Well, here are a few items. One, conveying, and usually unconsciously, of course, that you truly don't care. If they get some sense that you don't care about what their needs and interests are, then you're out. That's it. Influence won't happen. Doing something that goes against the other's interests or needs. That's pretty interesting. It comes up sometimes. It doesn't come up very often with very experienced, knowledgeable, capable people like all of you are, but it can happen. Failing to make a true connection. That's a big one. We think we're connecting, but when we walk away, we realize that we hadn't. Maybe we thought we were impressing them with our great track record. We talked about all the sales we've made, and we talked about all the wonderful deals we've closed. But what they really are looking for is something different. What they're looking for is someone understands how hectic and crazy their life is right now. And so they want somebody who's going to take on the whole process and manage it for them. But maybe that just didn't quite come out to them in the way that the conversation flowed. And here's a huge one that agents, allow to happen far too often. After the deal is done, letting the trust and connection lapse. Of course, it can happen in the middle of a deal too. If you start off with somebody and you're working really well together and you're really close and you're communicating and all that, but then you get busy or you've got some other big clients that you spend a little more time on, and then this other person starts to experience their relationship with you as not quite connected. Or, they left you a message and they expected you to get back to them, but you didn't, or you said you would, but then you didn't, or whatever, right? That trust obviously can be damaged quickly, much more quickly than it can be built up. So all of these things sometimes get in the way of us establishing or maintaining that influence over time, especially that fourth one. How many agents have told me over the last 4 years that I could do a better job staying in touch with my clients after the deal is done? If you've ever had a case where you did a deal with somebody and then a year later you heard that they were involved in another deal or their best friend was in another deal and they did not refer it to you, that's like one of the worst feelings you can have in this business, right? To realize that somebody that you did so much for and had that great connection with, had that great influence with, chose to go somewhere else later. Very disappointing, of course, and an effect on your business. So here is the principle that we're talking about here. People will not be influenced by you unless and until they feel related to by you. The point is, if they don't believe you understand their needs and you're committed to their needs, they won't feel related to by you. They'll be in the same room with you, but they won't feel that connection. And of course, we do all kinds of things to try to establish that connection. We might adopt a similar way of speaking to them, or we might wear certain clothing that gives a certain vibe that we think that they might connect with. Those things are fine. But the point is, people have to feel that sense of being related to by you until they can consider whether they want to follow you. And so if we can't create an experience in them of being related to by you, you're going to lose, whether it's a pitch, whether it's, bringing somebody onto your team or whatever it is. And so the goal here is to create an experience in them of being related to by you. This is why some of the listening stuff that we talked about in the mini session in April has such power. When you can feed back what we call paraphrasing. If a client tells you that the 10 things that they want most out of a particular deal or transaction or relationship, and then you can feed back in your words all 10 of those things that they just told you, that's an impressive feat that doesn't happen very often. And when people experience that, they know that they were heard. And when they know that they were heard, that is being related to by you. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with somebody as kind of like a first conversation where I simply just fed back what I heard. And they were so impressed that that was enough to get the deal. It happens all the time. So this is the principle. Now, we'll talk next time about how to live it a little more, but I want to say one or two more things about this before we pull these slides down. If you want to prepare yourself to live it, here are a couple things you can think about doing. We'll go into more detail next time. But ask yourself a simple question. Who are 15 important clients, previous clients, or teammates that I work with that I would like to influence? And ask yourself, what is it that this person values most right now in his or her life? What is it that he or she cares about? If you can't answer that question, chances are you're not going to be as effective in influencing that person as if you could. Imagine knowing that one of your, let's say another agent that you'd like to develop a better relationship with for referral purposes or something. Let's say that that person has a daughter who's on the volleyball team and she's on the traveling volleyball team and, they're going to all these tournaments and they're trying to get to the state tournament. Imagine being able to connect with that person on those terms that matter to that person, to be able to pick any topic out of the planet and say, I want to talk with you about how your daughter's doing on that volleyball team. And that person says, oh, she's doing great, man. She's a senior this year. She's the captain of the team, and they've won all of their games, and they've really got a chance to win the state championship. Wow, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. That's connecting to them on their terms. That's relating to them on terms that matter to them. On the other hand, if you have no idea what they value, what's important to them, then you're kind of like taking a shot in the dark. And so one thing you can simply do is recognize whether you are clear in your mind about what that person values or not. And if you're not clear, you can find out, have a conversation, talk about it. So let's pull this down. Okay, so let's talk about this principle a little bit. Thinking about the process of getting to influence by first getting to the experience of being related to. Let me ask you to put into the chat A time where you did not effectively influence somebody, where you made the pitch, but you didn't get the deal, or you worked with a client, but you lost the client somehow during the course of the deal, or you found out afterwards, after a deal that you had done with somebody and they were so happy with your service, a year later, they chose to go with another agent, or they referred their best friend or their sister or their brother or somebody else to another agent. Put something into the chat briefly. Don't have to like write a whole essay about it, but just like jot down a couple of things into the chat. And I want to ask one or two of you to come off mute and tell us a little more about that story. And we want to look at these stories through the lens of, was the person really feeling related to, or is it possible that they weren't feeling as related to as we thought they might be? Because the reality is every single deal you've ever done has succeeded partly because the person felt related to by you. And every deal you've ever lost or everything that's fallen apart could possibly be due partly to the feeling that that person did not have of being appropriately related to by you. I've used this example before. This is why, the politicians in their quest to appear to be relatable to the people that they want the votes from, they'll show up, in Seattle and they'll be talking about spotted owls and nature. And then the next day, they'll show up in farm country in Iowa and they're in a t-shirt and jeans out in some field talking about farm subsidies. We need corn subsidies. Boy, that's what we need more than anything else. And then a day later, they're in New York City on the streets talking about how important it is to have safe streets and better schools. It's a simple effort to try to be related to try to appear to be someone that the folks in those particular areas can relate to. Of course, that's what politics is all about. You're looking for people's vote, and people will make the effort to try to appear to be relatable to the folks that they're trying to seek the votes from. So let's start with Sarah here. Sarah, come off mute, please. Sarah said, I lost a listing this week. Their response was the other agent offered light staging and a handyman. So you made the pitch.
Correct.
You didn't get it, but you got some feedback from the person later that the person who did get it offered light staging and a handyman. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Got it. And how aware were you that those two things had value to that person you were pitching?
0.
Got it. Okay. Right.
0.
So I don't know why it didn't come up in your conversation. I'm not sure how it came up in the other person's conversation, but to whatever extent, through the lens that we're talking about today, the person felt related to by the person that they gave the deal to, because that person said, I can add some light staging. I can add a handyman. Would that be of value to you? And the person says, yeah, that has value to me. In fact, it has enough that I'll give you the deal. Possibly. Now, I'm reading into it, obviously. It's speculation what the other conversation is like. But you can see how easy it is for us to miss something. Sarah, if you had a choice to do that pitch again, knowing what you know right now, what might you have done differently?
Interesting. That was my response to them in an email was, I trust that they're in good hands. We've got a lot of great agents in the Tampa Bay area, but I said it as a lesson learned that I will, I also have a stager. I also have a handyman. So I said, I will remember to touch on those points, when meeting with sellers, because again, maybe they envision their place being a little tweaked. I didn't feel it had that impact immediately, but I need to list all the services that I have access to, my vendors. Again, I think just touching on everything that we offer as agents. I just need to do a better job at that.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Okay, Mai, can you come off of mute, please? Mai said, I underestimated the influence that my sister's new companion has on her. I lost her in 2022, although she was a 20+ year client. Mai, something you want to say about that?
Well, I have always made money, for her. And, in the Asian family, I'm the older sister. And this is actually was the end of our relationship. So I have not had, appetite, the desire to call her ever since, although, she's a multi-million-dollar client.
Yep. Got it. Well, I'm
How
sorry
can
to
you
hear
choose,
that.
how can you choose a relative stranger over, somebody from your blood and flesh? But I have kept my brother. He also a multi-million-dollar client, but that's not enough.
Yep, I understand. Thank you. So a painful thing for your business and maybe a painful thing for you personally as well.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what she valued was something other than family, right? Or what the companion valued, right? Somehow there was something in that person's mind that said, what's most important to me is X, but it's not family, right? If we come in, we might have the idea that, family, how could you go with anyone other than family? And what about the great track record? We've done all these great deals together. I've made money for her. That should be enough. Unfortunately, it wasn't, right? There was some different reality in that person's mind. And as valuable as those assumptions are, and maybe 95% of the time they would be valid assumptions. I've made all this money for you. Let's do it again. For whatever reason, the person chose something else.
And
So,
yet,
pardon?
And yet I never explicitly criticized her companion. It's just like I wasn't friendly. And that was enough.
Yep, got it. Thank you. And let's hear one more from Mavis. Can you come off mute, please? Mavis said, people I have known for 30 years called me first, but listed with someone else. I had sold 2 of their kids' homes. So here's someone with a 30-year relationship, sold 2 of the kids' homes, and ended up not getting the next deal. Mavis?
So, I lived around the corner from them, and our kids went to school together, and I didn't sell them the house. I wasn't even in real estate when they bought the house initially. And they called me, and they owned a loft and the house. And the wife had called me and asked me several questions about the loft, said she wanted to lower the property taxes. I mean, this is somebody who was calling me all the time for stuff. Gave her some information. Then she sends me a text showing that she's listed the loft with another agent.
Mm-hmm.
Never even asked me to pitch that. But then she said, wondering if you can come to talk about listing our house. Well, the loft is like a $700,000 property and their house is like a $3.3 million property. So I was like, great, let that other person have the loft, So then I went over there, and I think my mistake was they're building a house in another town, and they want to sell this one because who wants to own multiple properties when, it's just getting hectic. And I didn't pose the idea of them staying in the house that they're in and marketing it as an exclusive listing. I noticed when they picked the other people that it never had any open houses. It only had a broker's tour, no open houses. It said owner occupied, by appointment only, through the agent. Well, I never brought that up. I brought up, hey, they have a little, like a temporary house up in Sonoma. So I said, we can put it on the market and you can spend 10 days at your little house in Sonoma to make it easy for people to see the house.
Yep.
And while I was talking, I couldn't figure out what it was, but I felt like she was here. He was like all along with me, but I lost her.
Yep.
And once I lost her, I lost the $3.3 million sale.
Got it. Well, we've all been there, right? We've all been there.
It was the most painful, I have to say, in all of my real estate career, that was the most painful situation. I kind of wish they had never called me in the first place.
Yep.
But
Totally
it was the most painful situation I've ever been through. And that was just recently, right before I broke my arm. So
yeah, boy. Well,
it's been fun.
Thank you to all of you for sharing your stories this morning. They do illustrate the importance of us believing that we are providing value to them in whatever form we believe that they value. But it turns out we're wrong. It turns out that they valued something we didn't think about, or they understood it a little bit differently, or somebody influenced them in some way and we weren't aware of it, or we weren't aware of the significance of it or something. And it's not about blame. It's simply about asking, how can we become impeccable with how we relate to people? Is it possible for me or you or any of us to have one interaction that perfectly touches all of the necessary points of relevance and value with a person? It's absolutely possible. But if it's possible to do it once, is it possible to do it twice? Is it possible to do it 3 times? Is it possible to do it with every single pitch? Theoretically, it is. Reality, it's not hard. It's not easy. But always it comes back to how are we showing up in the relationship? What assumptions and speculations are we bringing with us that are therefore influencing what we choose to mention, what we choose not to mention, or how we respond to something? You know, sometimes somebody gives us something, but they're not saying it directly. They're saying something in a very kind of couched way or oblique way, and it kind of goes over our head. And we only realized later that they were hinting something. And if we had paid a little more attention, or if we hadn't missed that little clue, we would have been able to address it. And maybe that would have been, you know, the point that we needed to succeed. So all of this is great food for thought. Continue to give thought over the next week to times where you've succeeded in influencing others and maybe when you haven't succeeded. And think about the relevance and importance of whether you created an experience in the other person of being related to by you or not, because that's really all that matters. Okay, that's the principle for today. Look forward to seeing everybody next Wednesday at the same time. Have a great week, everyone.